and I was like, I couldn't like, but how could you, how is this possible? How can you even walk? Like, you should be so damaged from all that, brutal sex. And then that's when I realized, like, no, but women are not, women are not fragile. Women are not weak. Women are strong. So, like, just understanding, like, how extremely competent we are as human beings in both, how much we can take, both physically and mentally.
Welcome to Mind the Shift. I am Anders Bolling. The topic of this episode might come across as a little bit controversial to some people, or the most natural thing in the world. After all, controversy is something that is experienced by the receiver. It's not an absolute truth. Ninja Thyberg, welcome.
Thank you.
Filmmaker, is that how you would label yourself? Director?
Yeah.
But you've made... well, I guess it's about the same thing.
There's more like weight behind a director. Like filmmaker is, I am a filmmaker. I also write my own scripts and I edit and stuff like that. But I think like that there's definitely the director.
There's a difference.
The word director has more
clout, more oomph.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
and that's. I think that's also what I identify with the most, because it's really about. Making films is both like the craft, which is like a million different things you need to be good at, but being a director is about having a vision and being the one like in always like pushing further and further and fighting for that vision more than anyone. So that's, I think, what I...
But if you also have written the script, then you're in total control of the whole process and project. So, okay, but film director it is. Because you have made a number of mainly short films over the last decade. They have titles like Hot Chicks, Girls and Boys, Catwalk, The Stallion, which is Hingston in Swedish, among others. And all or most of them are centered around sexuality, power, and gender roles. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So earlier this year, you released your first full-length movie, Pleasure. And I saw it when it was shown at Gothenburg Film Festival. But it had its official release here in Sweden about a month ago, I think.
The theatrical release was the 8th of October.
Yeah. And it hasn't had its release abroad in other countries as yet?
Yes, it has. It's been premiering in France, Spain, Belgium, Netherlands. That's the ones I know. But it's coming. It's in Denmark now. In 2 weeks, and then it's going to be in the UK in beginning of December, and then the rest of the countries will follow in January.
Well, the big one,
the big
United
one.
States next year.
Yeah, next year.
Okay, because it is shot in America.
Yeah, mostly.
And
it's also shot a little bit in Gothenburg, in Sweden, but that's
true. Yeah, it is about pornography and the porn industry in Los Angeles. But it's narrated in a way that stories about the porn industry seldom are. So it's about this young girl who wants to make it in the porn industry. Can you just briefly tell us how it is told?
Yeah, so the film is seen through the eyes of a 19-year-old Swedish girl who the film starts when she arrives in LA, and she has a very clear ambition. She wants to become the next big porn star. So together with her, the audience get to follow her into this industry and like see how everything unfolds and how she learns how the industry works and what it takes to get to the top.
Yeah.
And it's really like one of the main focuses is that it's shot with a, like, as I say, a female gaze, which is like another perspective than what we usually see, especially when it comes to sex. Sex is mostly shot from a male perspective, where the woman is the sexual object and the camera is more pointed toward her body, looking at her, and as a viewer, you're more like identifying with the man having sex with the woman than the other way around. So that's something that I worked with very carefully, to reverse the gaze in a way, or use a female gaze to expose the male gaze, or the man behind the camera.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We're going to delve deeper into that, of course, during this conversation, hopefully. So how has the film been received so far, here and elsewhere?
I mean,
what did you expect, and what was the outcome of that?
I think it didn't get the reaction that I expected. It's been very in the US, like in Sundance, it got like, that was the most amazing.
That's a film festival in
where it had the world premiere, and we got like really, really amazing reviews and reactions. And then what I'm surprised. I'm surprised because it's really being treated like it's a really good film, which I didn't expect. I thought that it would be more like focusing on the topic, or people discussing the topic or being provoked by it, or but I've been like really complimented for the craft of like the filmmaking, which I did not expect since it's my first. But it hasn't been at all like stirring up that much of a debate, or I haven't gotten any like really critical reactions, which I kind of hoped for, because I wanted it to create more of a debate.
Yeah.
So
why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think maybe I succeeded too much, like because I wanted it to be nuanced. And maybe it's too nuanced, so no one is really being that provoked. I don't know. If it would have been more like bald in the way of like just making one statement and being more like one-dimensional, maybe that would have provoked more people, and they would have criticized the film, and then someone else would defend the film, and then maybe that could start some kind of debate.
Would that have been true to what you really want to convey and tell them?
No, and I guess, I mean, right now I'm just worried that it's going to be forgotten, because it's like everyone is like, oh yeah, great movie, very nuanced, and then that's the end of the discussion.
I don't think that's
you don't
gonna
think
happen.
so? No.
But I agree that I also haven't seen very much of a controversy around it.
No.
It's been reviewed very positively, mainly.
Yeah, and that's not only a good thing, because like someone, I mean, I have also heard people saying about other things, like if no one gets angry, you haven't done your work. And in a way, like that's what I'm thinking now, like maybe I didn't do my work good enough because no one is angry.
But I mean, it's important also to make people think and reflect. They don't have to be angry to
no, it's not
for
that,
it to
like
have an impact.
I don't want I don't want the majority to be angry, not at all. Like I don't like that feeling. I don't want to provoke for the sake of provoking. It's just like maybe I'm not maybe I'm not radical enough, because if the film is if it's like really if it really is in the like how do you say, in the front and
cutting edge,
then if it's challenging, then someone would be threatened and react. And so far it feels like no one is threatened by the film, and then I'm like, did I just please everyone? I don't know.
Well, it's called pleasure, so well, but I think I can only speak for myself here, but I think it's brilliant. I mean, I saw it in February, so it's been a while, but I remember it mostly. Maybe I've forgotten some details, but the general feeling of it and the general theme and story and everything, and it's brilliant, and it's obvious that you have I mean, it has many layers to it, and it's obvious that you have insights into the complexity of this phenomenon. I mean, like all things human are complex, and it's you can see that when you see, you can intuit that you have these insights, and I think that's good. You say that it hasn't stirred up controversy, but it shows that maybe this isn't as simple as you think if you don't know much about the theme. So what do actors and other people working in the industry, the porn industry, say about it, if you've heard anything?
Yeah, everyone hasn't seen it. It's been like different reactions, like very divided actually. There's been a little bit like how do you say, what's the word?
It's twofold, or it's like
no, like in a football game there's two
teams.
Yeah. And
okay.
So, or of course, yeah, I guess most are in the middle somewhere.
Team
but
pro and team con.
So some are very, very supportive and say like, finally a film that is on our side or showing our perspective, or like, and then some think that it's too critical, like criticizing them too much.
Mm-hmm.
And you can guess who is in what which team. But yeah, I mean, like men in power positions are more likely to maybe
criticize it.
Yeah, to be. I mean, because they all read the script, and so it's not that it's saying something that is not true, and they're all agreeing that it's very, very authentic. That's what everyone says, that it's like. Some said that it was like too realistic, but they think that it's focusing too much on the negative aspect. And in a way, I kind of also agree a little bit. I think that the film turned out to be a little bit darker than what I intended. I think that because we had to, cut out some scenes, and there was more, I think, more focus. I wanted the film to, or to me, like maybe I'm also picking up more on the light part, the funny part, and like warmth and what she's getting out of it. But what people, I think the reaction has been more like everyone is just talking about the negative aspects.
Yeah, but it is funny in parts actually.
Yeah.
Which many people don't realize until they maybe watch it the second time.
Yeah, usually that's what when people watch it the second time, they see the nuances, or like pick up on the humor, because for a lot of people it's quite a shock with the nudity and also that type of like brutality that the film has, is like almost like a overshadowing the rest, or and
it's also not. I mean, it's the sex is explicit, but it's not. It's not that explicit.
It's not explicit sex. It's more a full frontal male nudity, but there's no sex happening in the film. Like they're not having sex for real. So
yeah, you can just sense that, or you can guess that they are. But yeah, that's true. It's not explicit in that way. So it's not made to. And which is obvious when you see it. It's not made to arouse people or anything like that.
No,
so
not at all.
It's quite the opposite, actually. Yeah. Which is interesting, especially I think for men to see it, because you know that, I mean, most men, if not all, have watched porn, and most women, I guess, but probably a lot of women have never.
No, I think with women there's really. Like a lot of, I think it's a generation thing.
Yeah.
So for a younger generation, I would say probably 90% at least. But if like women in like my mother's age and up, like there's a lot of women who still think that porn is this like soft, glossy, like with the Vaseline on the lens, kind of like Playboy magazine porn.
Yeah, the Vaseline is not on the lens anymore.
No.
Elsewhere. So why did you want to make this film?
I've been interested in the topic my whole adult life, and I think I've always been drawn to the subject because it is taboo and no one wants to talk about it, and I've also been very provoked by the fact that like the hypocrisy within our culture, where people watch so much porn and then it's like it really exists in this like parallel world of
Universe.
shadow, and no one wants to admit it, and no one wants to address it, and that's just made me like, something that is itching that you want to scratch, and the doctors say don't scratch it, and then you want to scratch it even more, like that kind of like if people don't want to talk about it, and I'm like, then I get even more eager to
talk about it.
To talk about it.
Interesting. So what surprised you the most when you penetrated, if that expression is allowed, the porn industry in Los Angeles?
There's so many things. I think one of the first reactions.
How much did you study it before you began making the film?
I thought I knew. I thought I was really educated, and I thought I knew so much about the world. I had like studied gender studies at university. I had written about porn. I also made the short film Pleasure, which to do that because I wanted it to be like feel authentic. So I did a lot of research by like, watching all types of documentaries or reading like books, and tried to understand the culture and like picture what it is, and but then I think one thing that shocked me, but that also made me really understand more this tendency we have to victimize women, was that I kind of, because I had seen so many of these women being so brutally fucked in porn, and I kind of like, and then I met them, some who I really knew who they were, and I met them, and I realized that somehow I expected them to feel broken, both physically and mentally, because I had seen so much brutal like violence towards their bodies, and then I met them, and they were just like funny and happy and like strong, and there was nothing broken about them, and that also. And I was like, I couldn't like, but how could you, how is this possible? How can you even walk? Like, you should be so damaged from all that, brutal sex. And then that's when I realized, like, no, but women are not, women are not fragile. Women are not weak. Women are strong. And so, like, just understanding, like, how extremely competent we are as human beings in both, how much we can take, both physically and mentally. And there's so many ways of like how we talk about women, and especially women in sex work, where I think it comes from a place where we think we want to help, or we think we want to defend them, but it's so like patronizing, because we're tapping them on the head, like that, talking about them as being self-destructive, or for example, just one other example is that I met one woman, and she had that typical story that Bella is making a joke about in the film. Like
Bella is the protagonist.
Yeah, like she was raped by her father when she was from the age of 7. During her whole childhood, and then that would be, and then she started to do porn. And the way that would have been described in Sweden would be like, she has this trauma, and then she thinks she's not worth any better, and then she's gonna live the trauma again as a type of self-destructive behavior, because something in her is broken, and this is it's self-destructive. But the way she explained it was like, through when she started to make porn, she could live through similar experiences with people that she trusted in an environment that was safe, where she could always say no, and that was like the best therapy she could, like no shrink in the world could ever help her as much as it helped her to go through that and have that type of very, very like degrading sex, but that was a role play.
Mm-hmm.
So doing that type of role play when she was in control of the situation helped her and saved her life. She said she would probably not have lived if she didn't do that.
Interesting.
And that's just like one more way, like also an important shift in perspective of like either looking at women as like incapable and victimizing, or see them as rational and strong and
with agency.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I definitely I believed her. Like, I don't think that was a lie. I don't think that was something she had to tell herself in order to blah blah blah.
But did she say that this was? Did she see this as a period in her life that she went through, and she was eventually gonna leave?
Yeah, and she, when I met her, she had quit, so she wasn't doing it anymore.
How old was she then?
I don't know, 30 maybe.
Okay. So, I mean, this thing about being surprised that this, as you say, sex looks so brutal in many pornographic productions, and then you see these women are strong and have agency and all that. A question around that would be, did you also, before you made the movie, study sexuality in society in general? I mean, study or interview people about their sex lives and what kinds of sex that people are having when they're not being filmed, so to speak. I mean, in real life out there, because as far as I understand, it reflects. Oftentimes, it reflects a lot of what is actually happening in the real world. It's like, I mean, it's like any film, any art form is an expression of what is actually there. That doesn't mean that it's. That you have to show it or anything, but it does exist.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I didn't make an. I haven't studied it like that, but I think I've always been interested in the subject. So it's When I studied gender studies, I had. I didn't finish my last thesis. So I didn't get my exam, but what I started working on was like sexual, like what is the most sexual fantasies, like what the female sexual fantasies, I think, I mean, first of all, like porn is so many things, so I think everything you can find, pretty much anything. But then, so if you talk about more looking at like what is the general, like what is the mainstream porn, like what then it's like 99% of the time it's a male fantasy, and of course that is have some correlation to what type of sex people are having, but I think it's I don't know the word in English. In Swedish is like växelverkan. You know that?
Well, it's into how would you say that in English? It's they're taking turns.
Yeah, back and forth.
Yeah.
With people like poor, but I don't think that sex that much is a reflection of. Or porn is a reflection of actual sex, because it's a fantasy, and it's a fantasy for men, because they are making all porn for male consumers, because no women pay for sex or pay for porn, and most men don't pay for porn either, but the ones who actually pay are men. So that's no one is making fantasies for women, everyone is making fantasies for men, and then that of course influences also both men and women, because the problem is that women then still, when women watch free porn, they watch porn for a male audience, and we get this like internalized male gaze. Like me, for example, I really have like this imaginary penis. I know exactly, like I can be like horny in my penis like from watching certain things, because I'm so trained in like seeing images of female bodies that are there for me to fuck them, like put in a position, like triggering my penis. So I've developed like an imaginary penis that can get an erection. Like that's how it is being a woman, that we're so good at understanding the male desires, because everything in our culture is triggering male desires.
But there have been attempts to make pornographic films with a female gaze, as you say. But not very many attempts. But
there's Erika Lust is the biggest name. Yeah. She's also Swedish actually, but she lives in Spain. She has a company that produces porn for women.
Does it work? Is it popular? Do many women watch this?
I don't know. I think it's definitely like it's a business that is like it's growing. So I think it's bigger and bigger. There are also like Jackie St. James, who's one of the directors in LA, who makes female-friendly porn or porn for women. But as like one thing is like we don't have a culture, like women are not used to paying for porn. We don't go to strip clubs. We don't go to prostitutes. We don't even buy drinks to men, like at a bar. We're not the one paying for the drink. So that whole, like, it's so built into our gender roles that we are the prey and the man is the predator. So that makes it harder to get women to pay for porn. But it's also, it is hard to change, because it's not gonna, like, if all of a sudden we just like turn things around and make it like we are, what is the female sexuality is built from the male gaze. So most women are turned on by themselves being objects, because that's how we are raised.
Do you think that's the reason? Do you think sexuality is a social construct?
Oh yes, 100%. I mean, maybe not 100%, but definitely what we are turned on by is so.
So like when do you learn that? I mean, from whom?
I think from...
How can you override something that you're born with, in that case, if you're born with something else?
I don't think you're born with your sexual desire. I think that, like, for example, I mean, we have a sexuality. We're born with a sexuality, but then how that sexuality is triggered and like, you know, that's totally like built out of the cultural context, which is always changing but I mean I also I've experienced it myself a lot, like in my life too, that it is, first of all, it is possible to change your sexuality, and it's also like how what your brain is used to, like you know, if some things, for example, I remember when I was so sick and tired of, I felt like when I was watching porn and I just watched porn for men, and I just watched porn with like objectified women being fuckable in different ways, and then I decided like I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm gonna start looking at men, because I was then heterosexual, so I only had sex with men, so I was like, why shouldn't I watch men as my objects if that's the ones I'm attracted to? Like, I'm not attracted to women, so why should I watch porn where women are being objectified the whole time? So I started to watch gay porn, because that's the only place where you can find men as objects. And first it was really hard. Like, I couldn't be aroused by it, because I wasn't trained to be aroused by looking at men. But after a while, like slowly, and then I remember like the first time I actually came from like watching it, then like the next time it was so much easier. Then I got aroused much quicker, and that's like really, you can also see that like there's definitely trends in porn. Like something is starting, like now all of a sudden everyone wants to see squirting, or now everyone wants to see I don't know, gagging or whatever. And then that becomes a trend and everyone is looking at that, and then like that shifts through time or like during so and also then I was actually I fell in love with a woman also, and many years later, but first I couldn't see myself having sex with her because I was in love with her as a person, but I wasn't turned on by the female body. And I remember like the whole like breasts and just like that it was soft and not hard. There were so many things that I was like, no, but this is not, and I couldn't picture myself because also I was taller than her, and that was really like a turn off to be the tall one, to be the big one, because I had always identified as the small one. And then I just I like tried to have sex with her, but like it didn't, like nothing happened in my body. I was just like, and then I remember I was at one point I had seen a lesbian movie, and so I had watched like for an hour just, or like 1.5 hours just lesbians having being on the screen, and then I got drunk, and then I was with her, and then all of a sudden something switched in my brain, and I was just so turned on by her, and then we had like amazing sex, and after that I was all of a sudden turned on by everything that I wasn't turned on by before. So like that's really like, it's so much like how your brain is wired, but you can rewire it. It's just
you say that, but I to me that seems a bit well, it's possible, but that's not my view on life and humanity and human being. What a human being isn't that it's all brain. It's something else. It's something also non-physical that we're born here with. But that's a different story, perhaps. I mean, the brain is important, but it's to me it's more like a filters things that really come from another place. But anyway, have you had discussed a lot with heterosexual men about sexuality and how what they're triggered by and why, and how it started and when they started masturbating, and who told them to do this or not, or where they think it comes from and not come from, and if they can, I mean most men in this society that we're living here in Sweden and other Western societies today are fairly decent people. I mean, most men wouldn't be violent or wouldn't even dream of abusing women or anything like that. But still, there is a sexuality, the sex drive that seems to come very naturally to. I mean, I can tell as a man that it is there, and I have. This is going to be a long question. I'm going to stop this ranting now. But the question is, I guess, if there is a difference between. I mean, you say that we're blank slates and there is no difference really, and we learned this from the start. And I have a hard time believing that. But anyway, there are two things. I mean, sexuality can be just as strong in women as in men, obviously. That's no question about it. But there seems to be a couple of things, I think, and I'm not the only one. I've seen studies saying the same thing, more or less, that sexuality in men is a little bit more visual, focused on visual, and also it seems as if men have a little harder, more of a hard time than women to turn it off and on, to turn it off when it's not called for, if you see what I mean. Whereas women tend to have, it tends to be easier for women to switch it off and on. During periods, and when it's on, it's very much on, and then it can turn off. But for men, it's more difficult.
What do you mean?
Those two differences,
what do you mean? Because I mean, there's a million differences between men and women, and I think some of them are more, we're born with it. I don't think men and women are exactly the same generally, but then of course it's always important to say like in between the category,
exactly,
the differences are bigger
talk about
than
group averages. This is the only thing I'm talking about.
But those, a lot of those things, like for example that sexuality should be more like, men should be more visual than women. I mean, that is like, that feels like just like, of course they are, because like they are triggered visually by the male gaze everywhere, and men always see sexualized female bodies everywhere that is triggering their sexuality, and invites them to fuck them. Like that's how a lot of that visual language that we live in. Women don't see that, and then of course we are not. When we look at our boyfriend, it's not. We don't see like a trillion, billion, 100,000 images that we recognize from media landscape, looking like some version of a guy that we're having sex with, inviting us, or like being there to be looked at, or showing his body to us, or like showing like, oh, please fuck me, take me, I'm yours. We don't have, we're not triggered like so of course we're not going to be as visually oriented as men when it comes to sex. And that, so yeah, but when you talked about turning it off and on in period, do you mean having the ability to, for example, like if you're getting, do you mean
well, if you're not in a relationship, for instance, and you have a lot to do at work, or you have a project, whatever, you really have much to gain from just focusing on other things than sex. Then for a man, I mean, I can just talk for myself, and I know other men are saying this, that it's still very difficult to just discard it. I mean, you're walking in the subway and you see these female bodies around you, you get triggered, you know.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's I mean, when you talk to women about this, they don't understand what you're talking about. How that's completely crazy. Are you insane? Are you nuts?
Yeah.
I mean, of course I'm not thinking about sex when I'm in the subway.
I'm
thinking about going home to making dinner to my children, to go to work tomorrow, to do this project, whatever.
I think
anything but sex. And it doesn't have to be posters with beautiful bodies.
Yeah,
it doesn't even have to be that you see anybody. You just it just pops up, you know. Why does it pop up all the time? And it's not.
I don't know.
It's not very useful. It's not very useful, I can tell you.
I mean, maybe it is a biological thing that men have a stronger, more present sex drive. Yeah. Maybe it's a biological thing. I don't know. Or maybe it is just a cultural thing where sexuality is not like as a woman you learn that your body is like you have to defend your body the whole time, and sex is also always a threat, which makes it so much more complicated. It's not just the way that men are taught that like I have my penis and it's big and it's hard and it can penetrate and it's active and I can just like push it into a woman and then I'm conquering her. Like if that's how you are trained of viewing sexuality, then of course there's nothing like to me it's obvious that type of sexuality is easier to just like feel. But if your sexuality, if you get like, yeah, my sexual gender, like the vagina is a hole and it can be raped and it's vulnerable and it's small and it's fragile, and men are also a threat. And then there's like these thousands like, yeah, and I also feel too fat because sex is about me being a sexual object. And when a man is penetrating me, then he's conquering me. Like when we constantly get stimulated in those emotions, then of course sex is not as like is much more complex and not as appealing. There's much more, like there's always how do you say, like contradictory feelings, or so I think that could also just be the answer. That it could be definitely that we are just biologically or spiritually or whatever, like we're born exactly the same, but how we're being raised and how our genitals are being viewed, because that whole like I like to use the word in Swedish like omslutande samlag. I don't know how you would say that in English, but if instead of looking at the penis as being the big one penetrating, if you look at the vagina as being the big one like eating, swallowing, being the active one, and seeing like the penis is small because it's just fits inside of the vagina. The vagina is huge. The vagina is hungry, and when the vagina eats the penis, the vagina takes something from the man, and he's so vulnerable because his genital is hanging on the outside of the body, which makes him much more vulnerable sexually, and he's really giving away a piece of himself to the woman, so she's really conquering him when she's eating a part of his genitals with her entire body. Like if that was the way you looked at sex, then I think it would make like a total difference in how easy it was for a man to have an orgasm, or how easy it is for a man to be aroused, or
that's interesting. Possibly it's like that. Sounds a bit like that spider type of spider that where the female eats the male after sexual intercourse. Yeah, interesting. So, but I guess, I mean, a woman who has a very strong sex drive and sexuality could of course have sex whenever she wanted, probably in this society, if she was good looking enough and
that whole like being good looking enough, it's
or
still
or not
like,
even that. I mean,
yeah,
if she gives those signals to men that she meets in bars or whatever, she would
maybe not, but it's like, it is complicated because we are the whole idea that we are also the prey, you know.
But now you said before that the difference between individuals can be bigger than the difference between groups here. So I mean, women are also different.
Yes, of course. But it's like, I can sometimes be impressed. Like sometimes I meet a woman who actually don't see herself as vulnerable physically, or and then I'm like really impressed. Like, how can you have lived in this society without, internalized those feelings? Because that's like really impressive, because it's so hard as a woman. I mean, there's so many like, you can't resist those cultural ideas, because they're everywhere. So even though, like, we're different when it comes to, it's like the same thing with like, I think most women have felt too fat in their life in a way, or felt like ashamed of their bodies somehow on a level that I don't think men can understand really, because we are supposed to be the sexy one. We are supposed to be the sexual object, and sex is about us being sexy. So, and when we're not sexy, that type of shame, I think it's like maybe comparable to like the whole, men being afraid of being like gay or having a small dick or whatever. Like, it really affects like the inner, like this gender identity.
Yeah, I understand. So here's a question about power and sexuality. Maybe it's connected to what I said before about men perhaps not being able to switch off sexuality as often as women. If that's true, you might not believe that, but I think it is like that. Or would you say that a woman who doesn't get sex is just as vulnerable because of that as a man who never gets sex but he wants to have it?
No.
And why is that?
Because I think what you were saying before, like, we don't understand. I think women don't understand what it is to not have sex as an option, to not have intimacy as an option.
It was a little bit what I was talking about. The woman who wants sex can get sex.
Yeah, and like, even if like maybe she could get sex that would be really bad, and she doesn't want. I mean, I it's definitely not like everyone can just because there's so many women who want to have sex and feel like they never get to have sex, but it's because maybe they don't want to have sex with some super creepy
they're more picky perhaps than the general man
or they don't want to be like fucked that way. They don't want to be treated with that way that a lot of men would treat them. But it's still this, I think we at least like we're more used to the idea of that we have to defend our body from sex or defend our body from intimacy than that we have to fight or like fight to get it. No, I think that is super interesting. What that does to men, that they.
Yeah, I heard in another interview that you jokingly said that, I'm on team incel now,
Yeah,
which is a bit
provocative.
But explain what you mean by that.
No, but I really just it's. I think it's very logical in many ways that we have we're divided into these two categories, men and women, culturally, based on like biological differences. But then I think cultural is that what really matters in how we are shaped into these like opposites in many ways, of course, then like the man is the more dominant and the woman is the more submissive in different ways, or like submissive also when it comes to submissive. You can also interpret that as someone like putting someone else's needs before your own, like taking care of a child or whatever, like nurturing, and then, but we also get a lot of privileges from that, and that we don't. There's so many things that we also don't need to deal with that men needs to deal with, and then the feminist movement has, of course, arised from the fact that women are being oppressed by men as a group. Like there's no question about that, but it's not necessarily. Like there are also a lot of privileges in for women, and I think where we are now is in a point where we've really like for so long like identified everything that is our oppression, and everyone
victims.
Yeah, and everyone agrees to that now, or like that definitely after Me Too. Like there's really been more of an awareness of how this oppression operates, and like the toxic masculinity and everything, but we're not that aware of the negative, like how the privileges that we have and everything that.
So what are those? Can you give some examples of those kinds of privileges that women have?
Yeah, I think first of all that we get to there's so much like violence and there's so much brutality that women don't have to deal with, and also like there's like in between the whole like the competition of becoming the strong man and the alpha man. There's so much violence and power hierarchies, and so like maybe you could say that the alpha males or the men that are getting the higher positions, that they gain from if you're born to become one of those men, then maybe it's better to be man than being female. But a lot of men is really like how do you say, they're not winning, they're not gaining from this system. And then there's so much of like what's worth something in life that women have endless of access to. Everything that what I value most in life is love, affection, relationships, beauty, tenderness, intimacy, and that a lot of those things are men taught to not embrace, and then a lot of men are like being really, really pushed down in this system. Yeah. And then when like feminist movements are only talking about how men are oppressors and women are victims, of course the men in the bottom of this and who also they're just losing everything. They're not getting the privileges that the women are getting from also being the more because since women are viewed as more vulnerable or than men, they are also, there's so many things that, you know, for example, I know that I can always get help. Like I can always pull this card of like being a woman in need of help in so many situations that and men are always gonna like wanting to take care of me in different ways. And that's a privilege that I think women, we just know, we're not that aware of it, but it's there. Like we don't, in some ways we're not forced to grow up as much as men. We're not forced to become as hard and strong emotionally because we're allowed to be much more vulnerable, and which is also makes us like maybe be able to appreciate life better because we don't have to be that those type of like emotional robots. So then I understand like when the men in the bottom, how when they react to feminism and don't really agree on,
because they feel like victims themselves, really.
Yes.
I mean, those at the bottom, as you
yeah.
said.
And then of course, I mean, incels are, of course, they are crazy, and but I think that it's if the feminist movement are not, if it doesn't like start to pick up and understand, recognize and be more aware of like also the privileges that women have, it's just gonna increase these reactions.
Yeah, great, interesting. Well, it sounds a little bit like you're talking about the society 50, 60 years ago when you when you say that men are being pressured to do this and do that and be strong and never be weak, and I don't really recognize that in my life, and I'm older than you, but I know what you're talking about. But I think it's not really that tough for men today, especially not in the Western societies. Not like it used to be, not like in, you know, a couple of hundred years ago, when you were supposed to be a warrior and all that. But
no, of course,
because we are told that we need to show our feel. I mean, young boys in school, they're encouraged to show their feelings and to be nice and kind, and don't fight. If there's a fight between boys today, you summon the parents to talk about it with the teachers and all that, you know, which didn't happen 40, 50 years ago.
No, but it's also like a lot of those.
So I think it's the other way around. Actually, that the society wants to you know,
oppress,
mitigate
some
these
of the
male.
And I think, I mean, nowadays, I mean, when I maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I was more like I really thought that everything was a social construction. And I didn't think that there were any like biological differences between men and women. Today, I think, I mean, now also like how do you say, science?
Scientifically?
Yeah, have like developed, like now we know that you can be born with different types of genes that depending on the environment are going to be
epigenetics.
Triggered,
you know,
like
you can change your genetic.
No, but like if
code by way of changing the environment. Is that what you're saying?
No, that there's a lot of like two exactly like two brains that we have. Our brains are very different when we are born. Not very different, but between all individuals, like we have different types of genes. But then depending on the environment, some of these genes are gonna
be triggered or not.
Yeah. So that also so that it really is a combination of both environment and nature and nurture. But
isn't it that it's not danger? There's nothing dangerous in believing that there are biological differences, is there?
No, I think it's the other
only
way around.
It's a political idea.
Yeah, but because, I think
the basic thing must be that we're all equal, and nobody's properties and traits should be considered as being less worth than any others. That's the bottom line here.
Yeah, but I think that there is important to maybe see that we are different, but I think it's important to always fight for. I don't think we should embrace those differences. I think it would be dangerous to say that men and women are different and then we're supposed to be different. So we should give girls these types of toys and men like. I think we could be different. Some generally, but then we have to work against that, because I think it's always like those differences are also built, or like they have evolved together with patriarchy, and that we are like physically different. Like if men have a tendency to be more dominant and women have a tendency to be more submissive, that is something that is creating patriarchy, and then we have to work against it. So saying that something is, I mean, slavery could be natural. Like there's so many, war is natural. There's so many bad things that is natural in a way that like we have a tendency to do those things as human beings, but we have to decide on what kind of world do we want to have, and how can we. So if they're like maybe men are more aggressive than women, and that served a purpose when back in the nature, like there was a time when that served a purpose, and then maybe we have an ideal where like, no, we don't want to encourage that type of behavior, but then we have to find a way of like instead of if like we can't like just press it down and pretend like it doesn't exist. If it's there, then we have to find a way, like how can we still like if there is a certain type of like energy, how can we use it as a positive thing, and not try to, but definitely like if for example men are more aggressive or dominant than women.
Dominant is a different thing than aggressive.
I'm not sure. I think there's.
What do you mean by dominant? I mean, you can dominate by being soft.
Yeah, but I think that there is. I think, for example, dominant and submissive behavior is something that we have as a human beings. And if we look at a dog, for example, you can really see. I think, I mean, sexually, for example, I think it's very obvious if you're doing a role play sexually, like in BDSM. I've practiced that a little bit, not much, but I've practiced it enough to understand what it is, both to be in both positions, and I can really feel like something is happening to me. Like I understand, like it in a way. I can see myself as a dog. Like I can see that, like what's happening with the dog. That is like, okay, you're the master, I'm going to submit to you, or I'm the alpha, you're going to submit to me. That it happens, something like is triggered that I think is an one of like a natural emotion that we can have as human beings. And so I think dominant behavior is a type of behavior that is, it feels the same in people who feel that feeling, and everyone can trigger it, but I think it might be more common, or like maybe stronger, or like more accessible generally in men than in women. Maybe it's only like a cultural thing. Maybe it doesn't have any biological what do you say?
Cause? Or?
Yeah, but I think it is. I mean, that's how, like, what I've seen so far, and like I think it definitely has.
I think the only natural thing is love, actually, but this still entails that we are different, and that there on a group level might be differences, I think, between men and women, and that's fine, and we just need to.
But is it? I mean, what do you mean with
celebrate it?
I don't agree on that. To celebrate it, I think that. Those differences are
I don't
also
think we should
part of
suppress things.
I think, I mean, we're always suppressed. Like that's being that you know.
Well,
being a human being is suppressing your nature every day. Putting on clothes, brushing your teeth, being nice when someone, you know, being in a bad mood, grumpy, and still being nice to your colleagues at work, and everything that we're doing as human beings is like constantly suppressing our nature. So there's nothing wrong with them.
No, I know what you're saying. I didn't really mean it that way, but you're right. You're right. I mean,
but why should we celebrate those differences if those differences has created patriarchy? Because I think that's where patriarchy.
Patriarchy is it sucks. Patriarchy sucks.
and to
we shouldn't have that.
No, but then we have to stop embracing
You
those
know,
differences.
there are matriarchies in the world still. Have you studied those?
No, I mean,
there's a very interesting society in southern China called the Musuo, and I studied it a little bit. And it seems as if, I mean, it's very interesting. It seems as if in a matriarchy, everyone is better off. And then the men are better off and the women are better off. The men can have a lot of sex because they can go to different women every night, but the women are the ones who choose, and they raise the children still, but they are the ones who are making the decisions in society. But they wouldn't dream of dominating the men because the men are free, but they're, so it's, and so there seems to be a difference between the sexes even there, and in sexuality also, but it seems to be very cool, and everybody's very relaxed about these things. And to the men, it's obvious that it's the women who make the big decisions because they're the ones who are raising the children. So that's logical to them. So, I mean, everybody's happy. I mean, I might be exaggerating a little bit, that they have their problems, of course, but it's not the reverse of a patriarchy.
No,
it functions in a different way, I think, because women are in charge.
I think what we need to, I don't know the word, sträva efter, like strive for?
Yeah, I can say strive for, yeah.
Is to not divide people into these type of categories where you are being, because the whole idea of men and women, what it is to, like, even if there are some differences between men and women biologically generally, then like everything with gender roles, when we raise children into becoming two different, like you are supposed to be this and you are supposed to be the opposite, it's going to limit people. And
that I agree on.
Yeah,
of course.
and so I think, and since we have also a tendency as human beings to categorize ourselves, and that happens like when children are in that age where they really need to find their identity. Girls and boys, what they understand, okay, I'm a girl, and then they want to exaggerate what girl is, and they understand that girl is the opposite of a boy, and then everything that is boyish is bad and everything that is girlish is good, so they try to, like, then everything is pink and it's princess, and
but aren't you exaggerating a little bit what's coming from the outside, from society, what you think with your brain, and underestimating what you feel inside? Because I mean,
there's nothing natural with pink being the female
of course
color.
Not, of course not. But no, that's true. Yeah, you're right. But the core question would be, if we have a society which is completely void of gender roles, so everybody gets to develop into the human being that they are, feel inside that they're supposed to become, that they're evolving as would then 50% of all, for instance, people working with children be male and 50% female, and would 50% of the people working with motor cars be male and 50% female? I mean, for instance, that's a stupid example.
Perhaps, it's an example like that. I don't think will ever be possible to actually, but it's more like but no, I don't think it would be 50, but I think it would be definitely more than it is today. What is important is, like, there's never going to be like any society where you don't have a culture that are like categorizing or putting you into different identities. You're never going to be free. Like, that's not how we work as human beings. We need culture, and we need categories, and we need like norms. When you talk about like being like critical towards different like norms, like, yeah, we can only change the norm into a different norm. We can't like get rid of norms, because we need norms. That's how we deal. Yeah, that's how we function. So I think like men and women as categories are always going to exist. I don't think we can ever get rid of them. But then of course, like, hopefully we can have a society where it's much, much easier to be trans, that those categories are more loose, and maybe we have more than just two. Maybe we can have like be like a trans woman, or someone being like different type of femininity and masculinities, or like intersectionalized categories, but also to make it like much more. I think that these categories will always exist, but I think we also always need to like fight. It's always going to be a fight.
You're a feminist, obviously, but I understand that you have adjusted your feminism a little bit over the course of the last few years, or am I correct there?
Yeah, I think I'm always...
feminism, you can define it in many different ways.
I mean, I think that's gonna... But definitely, I think it's always changing, but also I get bored when I need to find new challenges or like open new doors to new rooms and discover new perspectives. So definitely now, when after Me Too, when so many of the things that I've been fighting for my whole life, when they all of a sudden becomes like mainstream, then I don't have to fight for that anymore, and then but also,
so you have a drive, you have an inner drive in that way.
Yeah.
That's my second question that I wanted to ask now about Me Too. Did the Me Too movement get things right, you think? Completely?
I mean, yes.
Basically yes, or
yes.
Totally yes.
I mean, it's a revolution, and of course it's not going to be nuanced, and I don't know if right is relevant. Of course there's going to be a lot of innocent victims, and it's going to be, that's the nature of the revolution. Like it's the mob. You're like, or what do you say? Like but it's,
you got to break some eggs to make an omelet.
Exactly. Like it was just. It just had to happen, and I think it was. But then, of course, it's super. I mean, women are not good. Women are not always right.
Inherently good.
No, and but it's just a move. Like, yeah, I just see it as something that had to happen, and it's gonna adjust. Everything. The first, it's with all these different movements, and that they, in order to really get somewhere, you have to like go all the way in one direction really hard and aggressive for a while to like break some barriers and open new rooms or doors, but it doesn't mean that you are right, but it can be necessary.
I was just thinking about one thing. It was that this sexuality can be complicated, which you show with your film Pleasure, or that porn can be complicated. But sexuality is also a bit complicated sometimes, and it's in some instances, some of the cases that were put forward during Me Too, I wasn't convinced that it was really. Actions going across the line or so, but in many cases it was. So as you say, it might be necessary to. It was necessary to do it to have this revolution anyway. So 100% of what was said doesn't have to be 100% correct and right, but because it was the female narrative that was dominating. It was the women's narrative that was had the upper hand during this Me Too revolution, which was fair enough. I mean, that was the thing, of course. But that meant also that, for instance, there was no talk about male sexuality, almost.
How do you mean male sexuality?
Well, male sexual. I mean, there was a lot of talk about male aggression and male sleaze and male filth.
Yeah, but what would you? I mean, can you give an example to like what you mean by a discussion about male sexuality?
Well, if there was some kind of male sexuality component in the fact that many men said things or made comments to women that weren't appropriate, but that came from because the narrative was that this is 100% power display. 100% power display, nothing else. Because I remember I did on social media once question that it might be only power display. Maybe there is some sexuality component in this, and then
how do you mean sexuality component?
Well,
just to understand, like, but can't the sexuality component also
if a
have a lot to do with power and sexuality are very
but it was
connected.
like if you said that, well, it's of course because the men are horny also, and they have this sexuality, the sex drive that makes them do this. This doesn't defend. I mean, that's no defense of it. It's indefensible what they did, because it's totally loveless and lacking of respect for another human being and all that. So it's completely, you can't defend what these men did, but you can make it a little bit more. Well, you can question the narrative that this is only power display, because you can display power in so many ways.
But
you don't have to do that sexually.
Do you mean that the narrative was that men were not horny, they just wanted to oppress women?
A little bit like that.
Okay, I think it was more like men can't keep their dicks in their pants in a way. Like I definitely that it had something to do with sexuality, but that wasn't expressed. Okay, I don't really agree on that, but I also think that the one problem is that that I think, because, as you know, maybe we disagree here, but for me it's very obvious that sexuality and that it is a cultural thing, and for men sexuality is very connected to power. I think it's for both, but to be that a lot of men have a dominant sexuality where they want to feel big and strong, and so those types of gender roles that is in for if you take it all the way and talk about the rape, for example, the roles in the rape in the rape situation is very connected to the male. The only part that the rape doesn't have is that men also want women to want them, of course.
And that's not present in a rape.
No, but they want to be the big active one, doing something, conquering someone, being active. Like, and of course now I'm just generalizing extremely and exaggerating, but so yes, I think that a lot of this, of course, the situation, the Me Too situation, the men were also horny, but.
But are women horny when they display power also? Women in power? Women in leading positions? Do they feel horny when they see their young male associates and want to grope them?
I think that happens, because a lot of these things are, in many ways, we are also the same, men and women, but as I said before, that's not how we have, our sexuality has not been stimulated or triggered by being predator, but by being the sexy one. So it's easier for a woman to get horny of the idea of like being thrown down on the bed by this dominant man who are so horny because she's so sexy, so he can't resist himself, and he's just want to tear her clothes off. Those fantasies are much easier for a woman to get triggered by than the idea of molesting a younger one. But I think it could happen, and it definitely does happen, but not as often at all. But I think what a really important part of Me Too also is that it's not just about the actual sexual assault. I think the sexual assault would not have been. The problem is that how the power structure around it, that all the men holding each other's back, and what the society does to a woman who complain about a man assaulting her. So that is much a bigger problem, the structure around it, and how impossible it was to, because if it would just be like, okay, there are some men who are either just power hungry or too horny, and they, whatever you want to call it, who, for example, grab or grope or force themselves on a woman. If it would have been easy for the woman to just immediately, you know, report it or talk to someone about it, and everyone would just react, like believe her and like condemn the man, or if then it wouldn't be the problem that it is. So it's not just about the actual assault, but the system around it.
Yeah, well, I think it was very stigmatizing for men to be associated with other men who had done these things. It was very, nobody wanted to touch the subject. It was very sensitive for men.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, nobody would even dream of defending a man who had been accused of sexually assaulting a woman or groping her or so.
During
Me Too.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, but that's also.
That didn't happen even.
No, but that's also a big problem with. I think that's what we're doing when we are making the rapist this type of monster, or we talk about rape as being something that is just like a different type of crime, and that rapists are monsters that doesn't deserve any forgiveness or love, or then like I guess like. We think that we're doing women a favor by condemning the crime, but we're just making it so much more impossible to ever accuse a man of crossing those lines. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that this, like, if we're raising men to be sexual predators, I mean, I think we're raising men to be sexual predators, and I think it's I'm impressed that not more men are being more sexually violent. Like if you look at what porn looks like, or like there's so many things in our culture that is constantly, how do you say, stimulating that type of sexuality. So and also what like women are like, we want men to be like strong and dominant and confident and all those things, that is gonna create in the end, it's gonna create sexual predators. So, if we don't address that as a collective, and if we stigmatize men who are crossing those boundaries on the level that we are now, that where no one wants to, because then we can't accept that our friend is assaulted anyone, or we can't believe it. Because we don't want to see ourselves or our friends as a monster, and then we're not going to believe the women who accuses the men for that. So I mean, of course we should still take it very serious. I'm not saying that we should like forgive men or like not take it very serious when those crimes are being committed, but we also, if we can't like continue to treat them as monsters, because then that's just not gonna, it's gonna be the opposite effect it's not gonna help the victims. It's gonna make it much worse being the victim, because no one wants to believe that someone they know is a monster.
Yeah. Also very important, you have said many interesting and important things today, and I might have some differing views when it comes to what is at play here, but it's been fascinating. We talked for a long time. I just want finally to say something about or ask you about what's next here. I mean, your film Pleasure and the prequel, the short movie with the same title, have been at the center of your professional life for many years now. So I understand that you are entering a different stage now, but perhaps not completely different. Are you? Can you tell us a little bit about that, or?
I cannot, unfortunately, comment at all on.
Okay. Can you say generally what would you like to explore?
From
now on.
I will always, I think, continue to work with the same focus and like the female gaze. I think the female gaze is my main priority. So
it's going to be films, or do you want to write books, or what do you think?
I mean, I'm first of all films, but I also really would like to write a book.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Okay, Ninja Thyberg, where can people find your work, Pleasure and
it's
all the other
in
films?
theaters.
Is there a website?
I have a very old website, but some of my films are on Vimeo. Some is on, I think, Draken Film, like the Swedish Gothenburg Film Festival, and the short films. But and some are on YouTube. But the feature film Pleasure is in theaters now in Sweden, and it's going to be in theaters in most countries in Europe, and then in the US, and then it's going to be on streaming sites, but that's maybe in 6 months or something.
Yeah, go and see it. It's very good. Ninja Thyberg, thank you so much, and good luck with the new projects and everything, all your coming endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Thank you.